Well, we have more today on a tragic case and a verdict today in an Edmonton courtroom. Police say the investigation that led to that verdict is unprecedented. A man sold a gun to a teenager who later used it to kill 2 police officers. That teenager has been found guilty of manslaughter. Emily Fitzpatrick has the story.
In a courtroom packed with family and friends of the victims, Dennis Okima was found guilty of 10 charges, including manslaughter. The 21-year-old sold the semi-automatic rifle that was used to kill 2 police officers in 2023. 16-year-old Roman Chuchuk was responsible for a number of shootings with the gun he bought from Okima. The first was a random attack on a Pizza Hut delivery driver in March of 2023. The victim survived but suffered permanent injuries. Days later, police constables Travis Jordan and Brett Ryan responded to a domestic disturbance at Chuchuk's apartment when they were ambushed and shot to death. Chuchuk later killed himself. In court, the judge said while Okima didn't pull the trigger, by selling a rifle to a 16-year-old, he should have known something terrible could happen. Following the verdict, Edmonton police said the investigation was complex.
This was an unprecedented investigation, a first in Canadian history for firearms trafficking, an example of the excellent EPS strives to uphold. I'd like to commend everyone for their outstanding efforts in honoring the memory of Brett and Travis, as well as their families.
Last month, Okima pleaded guilty to other charges, which included drugs and weapons trafficking. A sentencing date is scheduled to be set for June 12th. Emily Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Edmonton.
All right, let's dig a little deeper into this case. Our next guest is a criminal defense lawyer, former Crown prosecutor. Balfour Durr joins us now. And so I'm sure some people watching Balfour are wondering, how is it that selling a gun would lead to a manslaughter conviction? Explain that to us.
Sure. It really relates. There's 2 parts to the answer. The one is what manslaughter is, or the definition of manslaughter, which is simply if a death is caused by an illegal act. Now, the illegal act is no more specific than that. If there's an illegal act and it leads to a death, that can be manslaughter. And the second part of it is the concept of being a party to an offense, more commonly known as aiding and abetting. So if you assist someone, if you're driving the getaway car, you're not the person in the bank, but you're just as guilty of robbery. So that those 2 concepts come together in this case.
So in British Columbia, before charges are laid, the Crown needs to be fairly sure that they can get a conviction. That's part of the standard. But the other part of the standard is it has to be in the public interest to go ahead with the prosecution. I don't know if the standard is exactly the same in Alberta, but let's talk about that second part. Do you think it's in the public interest to charge someone with manslaughter, though they didn't have a direct hand in the killing?
Well, yes and no to that answer. It's a good question because it's really fact specific. So to be guilty of manslaughter, the person would have to have been reasonably foreseeable that an illegal act was going to be committed with this gun. And that's the key. If there's that reasonable foreseeability that there's going to be an illegal act, then I can see why the person should be charged. On the other hand, if it's not reasonable, if somebody loans a 22 rifle to the neighbor out in the rural areas and he wants to shoot gophers, so you wouldn't think anything of consequence would happen from that.
Yeah, you didn't know that I was going to ask you live on the air a question about legal philosophy, but you answered that perfectly, and I think that's very interesting. And the judge in this case, based on that report we just saw, said that it was foreseeable that giving that gun, selling that gun to a teenager was going to lead to bad consequences. There's something else in this tragic story, and that is 2 people who were killed were police officers. Do you think that played a role in the charging decision?
I practically, yes, but, I think it could have, the charge could have been laid regardless. The law wants to treat everybody the same, whether they're on-duty police officers, off-duty police officers, Joe Blow in the street. But I think there's, just practically speaking, and it's just a human nature thing for people, there'd be a heightened sensitivity, if I could put it that way, for police officers on the job, firemen, anybody in those positions who risk themselves for the public. I think, there's a built-in sympathy on their behalf, and maybe there should be.
Yeah, and we saw it, I think, in that terrible case of the Mounties who were murdered in Mayerthorpe years ago.
Right.
One last thing, no sentence yet has been handed down. What are you looking for?
I would expect, the accused in this case was young. That certainly works in favor of lowering a sentence, but it wouldn't surprise me if, there were a double-digit jail sentence here. You've got, these dead police officers, 2 of them, someone else that was killed. There's a number of really aggravating features here.
I always love talking about legal issues with you, Balfour, because you have lots of practical experience. You're obviously a very thoughtful person. Balfour Durr, criminal defense attorney, former Crown prosecutor. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.